Hi, listeners. This is From Ideology to Unity, and I'm here with Eric Fontaine from the RDO podcast. Hi, Eric.
Hey Nick, how you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, I'm on the roll today.
Yeah, you've been putting in work, a lot of interviews.
Yeah, it's going well. So, who are you? What's your backstory?
I am a self-employed business owner and entrepreneur out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm originally from Fort Worth, Texas. Basically, just a regular dude. I'm getting my own podcast started as well here. So, just kicked off the first interview last week. And essentially, what I do is I own and operate a small cleaning business. And I'm also trying to utilize the podcast as a platform to help others learn how to become self employed, get unstuck in terms of money, time, and overall freedom. And that way they can, from there move towards their higher aspirations and hopefully actualize themselves to the greatest extent after that point. So it's kind of my own way of just trying to help people elevate their mind, body, and spirit through that process.
Right. So, what's your motivation then? What drives you to do this?
Well, what drove me to create the platform itself and jump into this whole podcasting thing was really, just looking back at all the struggle that I personally went through and creating the resource that I wish I would have had, basically. So I did a lot of, research across thousands and thousands of hours, whether it's business related, spirituality, whatever it may be, just trying to gather a foundational understanding of everything that I needed to know in order to navigate through the world, um, even know where to start in terms of starting a business and just getting my mindset right, first of all. So it took me about 8 years from the time of having the idea to maybe one day, you know, create a business to actually, you know, fully operating a business and going full time self employed and just the personal journey along the way. I had a not the worst,
Hmm.
but I had a pretty rough childhood. I know somebody's always got it rough, worse out there, but I grew up low income, dysfunctional household, so I had to work out a lot of my own personal issues in that process as well, and
Oh,
just
you did
try and
well to get.
find.
Sorry.
Oh no, no, you good.
You did well to
Go ahead.
get where you've got to, from there. Maybe in some ways it maybe in some ways it was what you needed. Maybe it was well, you can tell me. So, what did you learn from your child?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it wasn't great, but looking back on my entire life, I wouldn't change one thing. And all the worst of it, um, and you know, it's not something that I tend to go into detail about, but the long and short of it is when you don't have the basics of what you need, life is rough. You miss out, and it's difficult to find any stability within yourself if you don't have food to eat, if you don't have proper clothes to wear, things like that. And that was really the least of it. So it's like I said, it's taken this journey, um, really trying to catch up first of all on all the developmental aspects that I missed out on and opportunities that I missed out on along the way growing up. And then just, I feel like now people might look at where I'm at and say, oh, you know, well, that's successful. You got your own business, self employed, whatever. But that's actually, for me, I feel like I'm just getting started.
Yeah,
And I
it's
mean that in the
relative.
sense that, right. And I'm just now able to, very recently to be investing in myself, to be doing things like this that I truly see value in doing and spending my time and energy and focus towards. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just getting started. And I definitely want to, like I said, help other people get unstuck in that sense of money, time, and freedom so that they can then do the same. I think the more people we have who are able to liberate themselves financially, um, the better that is for society.
All right, that's yeah, it is really important because a lot of lost young people. Well, it's not just young people, really. There's a lot of people who are lost most of their lives and then they retire and they still don't know what to do. And so,
Yeah.
what let's pin down from your perspective, anyways, what exactly are these core things that we need? Because I don't think it's not just material things, though certainly if you don't have the material essentials, the rest might seem more like a luxury. But what are the other needs you need?
Well, um, let's see. I'm gonna quote Kanye West here because I think he said it best, and that is, "How's the audio, by the way, on my end?"
It's not perfect. There's a little bit of interference.
Okay. Give me
Maybe
1 second. Let me adjust this. Just 1 second.
should have that background music they have when you're on those.
All right. Tell me now. Is this a little bit better?
Uh,
Is it
Not
still
really.
coming in choppy?
Yeah, maybe it will do. I suppose. I don't really know what the reason is, but
Okay.
it's not too bad.
Okay. How about now?
Seems better. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It looks like, sorry about that. Okay. All right. Yeah, it looks like I actually hit that little setting on the side when I adjusted it. So, technical, still working out the technical bugs here. So you were
It's
asking
still not
what
gone too bad.
are, hmm,
Let's just carry on,
is it
maybe.
just, okay. So you were asking what are um, the other components to that,
Yeah.
essentially, because it's not just money, you know.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, I'll quote Kanye West on this. He said, "Having money ain't everything. Not having it is." So, in other words, having money is not going to solve all your problems, but not having it, I mean, you can't work with that. You got to have it, and that doesn't mean you have to be rich, but you have to have what you need and be able to invest in yourself and utilize it as a tool. So you need some level of financial stability, And that's, for a lot of people, their mental, their physical health, everything tends to follow the level of financial resources that they have. Not for everyone, but it's kind of hard to have proper nutrition to, maybe have that jujitsu membership and just do the basic things you need to keep your mind and body in balance, um, without having that. So for me, that's the starting point. And there's also a mindset aspect to this, and the mindset develops simultaneously as you become open-minded enough to understand your own capacity to be self-employed and to want to embark on that journey and get unstuck. you know um, in many ways it's an evolution of your mind, body, and spirit, as well. So I think that starts with core values, and I think we have to learn then to navigate through life with the one truth that we always have, which, in my opinion, is intuition. And I don't
Yeah.
mean some kind of luck factor that says, oh, I'm going to play the lottery today, or it's, something like that. I think it's a sense that we don't fully understand scientifically yet, though there is research into this so-called sixth sense. Um, it has other names: higher self, universe, God,
I mean,
whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
But
there is a scientific way of looking at it that I've come across. I think 42 talked about it in one of his videos where there was this guy, there's an aspect of it which is to do with your gut, right? Where sometimes you just
yep,
feel off. And so he was behind this console and he was responsible for basically the final person deciding if nuclear weapons are fired from this
okay,
certain location, certain base or something. And he was ordered to do it, but something fell off. He does something in him. It was just like, no, no, this isn't the answer. This isn't right. Like, I'm not going to do this. So
right.
and we're lucky that he listened to his intuition. And there is something there, and I'm not sure if it's entirely true, but there might be. I think I heard that there's neurons or something like that in your gut, and perhaps there's something like that in your heart as well. And so, I mean, I might need to fact check on that, but
Well, the heart emits over 20,000 times more electromagnetic activity than the brain, which
well, that's certainly something.
was, yeah, when once they discovered that, and I don't know exactly when that was discovered, a number of years ago. That was actually stunning to the scientists who discovered that. They figured the brain would be the highest level of electromagnetic activity, but it's actually the heart.
Yeah,
So what they're finding, or what it seems that they may be rediscovering, is that each organ, and well, I'll say each organ carries its own frequency and an individualized energy that forms a collective network within the body. And you also have certain energy points in the body. So they're essentially rediscovering chakras,
yeah.
scientifically, and beginning to understand, hey, you know what? We actually do have an aura, and we can see it energetically now. You can see that each person has an energetic field that
That's
they're
the
emitting.
electromagnetic field, right?
Yes,
I mean, there is the
but
question of whether the electromagnetic field is the same thing as um chakra field, or if they're just related.
yeah, I think So I think the chakras are like localized points within the body, energetic centers within the body, and then the energetic field is actually being emitted outwards up sometimes 20, 30 feet from your body in radius. And so that's, they're scientifically understand that you can literally change the energy of the room by walking in the room. They say some people uh, light up a room when they walk in, or vice versa.
Yeah.
It can kind of kill
I
the
mean,
vibe. We're all carrying our own actual unique energetic frequency, and it varies in radius. But that's a scientific fact at this point.
yeah. Eckhart Tolle told a story of when one time he walked into, he had a conversation with someone who was known to be a really paranoid schizophrenic. And
Okay.
for like 10 minutes when he talked to the guy, he was completely lucid.
Hmm.
And that's pretty
Interesting.
interesting. So
Yeah.
we talked about the gut and the heart. So just a brief search online, and I found, yeah, that this gut brain axis with the communication network connecting your gut and your brain.
Yep.
So physically and biochemically linked, and there's the vagus nerve and neurotransmitters connecting them and
Yeah.
more. And then there's the heart. So apparently they managed to do, this is Jefferson edu, but they've got, there's a 3D map of the heart's neurons. So
Wow.
that's really interesting. And yeah, so there really is a connection between our gut, our heart, and our mind. And there's this it's well known in a non-scientific sense that there's, you listen to your heart, gut reactions, gut instincts,
Yeah.
and it seems that this it's being verified in some way.
And it seems like through all of the dogma, like you focus on, through all of the dogma we've lost, even in the past 100 years, 120 years, we've lost generations of knowledge just due to pure arrogance and
Yeah.
ignorance. We're having to actually go back and relearn things we already knew 100 years ago. And all these phrases, it's built into our language that, like you said, follow your heart, uh, go with your gut. These things were not by accident, and that doesn't mean every saying is a scientific truth, but it means there's some truth underlying in the words themselves and in the ideology that people live by. you know so another thing, it's very interesting what happens to history as we move forward. So I can't remember, I believe it may have been Elon Musk talking about going to Mars, with Lex Friedman, and on a particular podcast that they had, and they were saying, I mean, essentially, if we did go to Mars and something happened to Earth, would anyone even believe that Earth existed?
Um, maybe, but they would see it differently. They would see it as, and at most, if they develop good on the telescopes, they might see some devastated landscape. But maybe,
Well,
maybe
yeah.
if Mars was once green, who believes that it is? But I suppose it was. Who'd believe it if they look at this red, barren landscape? I mean, I
Well,
could go
that's the
into
weird thing
certain
about
theories about that, but I'm not going into that yet.
that's the strange thing about where we're at now, is if it's not happening in our faces, we don't believe it. And
But
I don't
reality is
want to get
stranger than
too,
fiction.
yeah, it really is. And I don't want to get off track here, but just the way that people perceive the world each through their own lens of dogma, coming from
Yeah.
one source or another. People are literally blinded to things that were just known previously and things that are right under our nose. So
Yeah.
that's where I'll leave that. I know we can dive into
I have got an
ancient
idea.
history and what's that?
Well, it's not just that the people are blind to what's under their nose in the sense of everyone believes this, so people are blind to it. But it's also, I mean, there is this I can't remember what organization it was, but Tim Pool was talking about it. And it's this you see this chart of how divided people are politically in America, for example, and other countries as well, right? And it shows that it's got increasingly divided in the last 10 years or so, right? To the point where
Yeah.
there's all these interconnected dots on one side and all these interconnected dots on the other side. And in the center, there's only just a few dots, right? Whereas before it wasn't like that. And it's like they watch different news sources, they see a different perspective of reality. And it's like they've got entirely different facts they're working with. And that itself is another interesting aspect of it.
Well, they have everyone wasting their time. That's
Yeah.
what it is. Divide and conquer. And
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think you may be referencing the Tavistock Institute. Is that it?
Maybe.
The Tavistock Institute on Human Affairs or Human Relations. I always get it mixed up at the end. But the Tavistock Institute is known for having systematically orchestrated control over humanity. And there's a lot of conspiracy theory surrounding this, but there's also a number of facts associated with the organization, like
There
the
are other
fact that it
organizations.
does exist. Yeah, and yeah, there are other organizations as well, um, but just this world that we live in is by design, and that's for better or worse, depending on who's in control. And if you look around, most people aren't even in control of their own lives. So um, until we enact control over ourselves and our own life and our own future, we can't hope to create the world that we would like to live in. So
Yeah.
I would like to see more people empower themselves and bring a positive focus to society.
And there might be
Not
opportunity
not just
in a time of chaos. There might be
there
an
will be
opportunity to change things.
there's always opportunity, and
That's true.
you're right. It's typically at the worst of times you have the potential to make the most progress.
Hmm. So there are, what do you say the keys to success are?
I would say again, this may be different depending on each person. This let me correct that. This will be different from person to person depending on your values structure. So for me, though, personally, I perceive my own success because I can speak on that. Um, would be freedom of time and freedom of resources to continue to actualize myself, whether that be through business, societal reform, um, and just kind of spreading that message again through the podcast or whatever it may be. So the keys for me have been just chipping away at myself and in order to restructure. And I know that sounds kind of general, but transforming yourself is a necessary aspect of your success. No matter how much you could inherit $1 billion tomorrow, but if you're not your ideal self or moving towards it every day, you're never going to be fulfilled. So this is where we get into, maybe a Jordan Peterson philosophy of just 1% better every day. Focus on that, even if you don't get it, and it's amazing how your life will change if you continually move in a forward direction and you continually do what you can when you can with what you've got. I mean, the key to success, in my opinion, is to just never give up on those things. And that includes becoming or striving to be the best version of yourself that you can be.
Yeah, that's definitely
So I
that's
think
definitely
it's a matter of I think it's a matter of actualizing your potential, like become who you could be.
all right. Do you think that what values or beliefs that you hold, do you think they can affect how well you do?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a simple litmus test for whether or not you're moving in the right direction, despite what your family has told you, despite um, you know where you grew up, what environmental influences are placed upon you. There's a simple test, and it's that little voice in the back of your head. And I don't mean anything schizophrenic or anything like that. I mean, it's a voice that uh, Alan Watts put it best: when you're silent, it speaks. When you speak, it's silent. It's that intuition that I brought up earlier, and I think people get caught up doing what they think they should be doing what's been popularized by society, doing what they've been programmed to do by their parents or whoever it may be, and they're not happy doing it. They don't find truth in it, first of all, because when you find truth in something, no one can stop you from engaging in it. But I think all too often we end up going through the motions and doing things and really wasting our life away, doing things that we don't believe in, doing things that we don't find truth in. And they may not be inherently wrong, but they're keeping you from doing more and being more, in terms of what would actually serve you. So I'll I'll give an example. I don't go to church, but it doesn't mean I don't believe in a higher power, or if you want to refer to it as God, the universe, whatever. I totally believe in that, that there is something greater, that there's a one creative source for everything. And I think
Hmm.
I don't have it all figured out, and no one does, or we would just have all the answers. It would kind of be an open and shut case. But all too often we get lost and separated amongst one another instead of collaborating like we are here today and
Yeah.
having a conversation. People begin judging and then fighting, and then it really just unravels from there. So I think just the first step, the first key is to follow what is true to you intuitively and go from there. And you really can't go wrong if you're doing that.
Yeah, it's
So
like a way to hone in on what you love to do, what what how you want to live your life. And if you listen to it, you'll see that the answer was there the whole time, right before your eyes, and you just weren't
yes.
paying attention because there's this whirring thoughts in the background about this, that, and the other, and everything society says and everything like that. But your
Yep.
intuition is always smarter than your ego.
It knows everything, and it's just this transcendent element of of being a human being that again, I don't think we fully understand it scientifically. They're starting to play around with some little experiments, but they've even tested some of this like with children, where they ask them to just spontaneously answer complex questions, like essentially guess. But children are a little more intuitive. They're not dulled down yet. Younger children, they're not overridden with programming and vices and all kinds of other things. So um, I've seen some thought experiments where they'll ask children to essentially guess or to just play with something, and they naturally gravitate towards solutions intuitively, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
while the more separated from that intuition, that one truth that we have, the more problems, the more dysfunction ensues.
Okay. Well, I think yeah, you honed on something really cool there. That intuition aspect of things, that's really important. And what would you say to someone who feels that intuition is a mystical woo-woo thing?
Yeah, they're just playing tea time. I mean, not to be harsh, but um, if you think you're gonna win the lottery off your intuition, and you're gonna, you know, read people's fortune, and just you're playing pretend, you know.
Oh, that's not
And
what I meant. There are some people who look at it as they
oh,
to
you
them,
mean
yeah, they
that they
do.
don't believe that that component of their being exists?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. Well, then I would invite them to test it out. I mean, some
that's
people
what they believe
are
in, science and all that.
yeah, but I think if you're asking someone to believe in something just cognitively, it's impossible.
That's true.
We can't. I couldn't believe in just intuition. I had an idea, and over time, I cultivated a greater understanding to realize, you know what? Every time I don't go with my gut, my intuition, whatever you want to call it, every time I don't go with this, I see real proof that it didn't work out, you know? Um, so I was at a point, I pay attention to details. So as I'm trying to navigate through life, and I notice I knew I shouldn't have done that. And I can't predict the future. I'm not a psychic, but we go through this present moment and we have an inclination to do something or to not do something or to move in a particular direction. And I believe that that is present within everyone. But
Yeah,
again, when you're silent, it speaks. So you have to have some level of groundedness and objective perspective to actually navigate through a decision responsibly in the first place.
hmm.
And your mind may be saying one thing and your gut may be saying another thing. But if you look at some of the most intelligent, most uh, high achieving individuals, they often refer to some variation of this, following your heart, your gut, always never second guess yourself. There's a lot of this ideology at the top of the success, uh, of the realm of success, if you want to call it that.
Yeah,
And, I began picking up cues from there and then testing it. It's like, okay, well, I'm getting the notion to do this or that, and I would literally test it out. Okay, well, let me see what happens if I do? Let me see what happens if I don't. And that's about as close to a controlled study as you can get because your life is dynamic. So you're just gonna have to implement it and prove yourself right or prove yourself wrong. But I think we find in the end that we are equipped with some higher sense that is there to serve as a guide,
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
and there may be science behind it that we don't understand yet, but I think for me personally, just trial and error and actually testing it out has been the proof for me.
Yeah, and I would add to anyone who's skeptical about intuition, the first step, which you might be more receptive to, is simply think for yourself. If you think a lot and you that's the way you do things, then think for yourself rather than going with the thinking that you're told to think. And from there, you might get a sense of what feels right to you. uh yeah, but if that doesn't resonate, then you can just think for yourself. So
Right. And
'cause that's how it started with that for
that's
me.
that's
I w-
part of what it is. That's part of what it is. It's just developing an objective awareness of where you are in the world and what's going on. And just as you begin to think more and more for yourself, you actually begin to see a lot of the back end on this programming because we live in a world of programming. I mean,
yeah,
they literally call television programming. I mean, isn't that's a little weird, you know? Why not call it entertainment or anything else? They literally call it programming. And
yeah,
you
that's
know.
actually funny. It was in our face the whole time. I suppose we didn't. It's more obvious now that we know about computers, that we think, okay, we're programmed.
That's true. Yeah. But that's it. People are gonna have to discover for themselves. This is not something that you can force on people. You can't fear monger them into not that you're trying to do this. I'm just saying
Hmm.
this is how a lot of things are spoon fed to us through fear, through force, through penalty of
Yeah, that's how we're taught.
consequence.
And
Yeah,
even if we grow up, when we see our parents doing things a certain way, we learn to do it that way. And if they're making mistakes or if they're arguing or alcoholics or whatever, you know, we will learn that.
yeah,
Um, so I suppose part of the solution is getting out of your ego and listening to the inner voice. And as for the ego, like often when we don't listen to the inner voice, well, this increasingly we can get all sorts of self-centered behaviors that ultimately hurt us, right?
yeah,
Like an alcoholic is ultimately often drinking to avoid confronting that inner voice or themselves.
yeah.
Someone who's there's also that's addiction is ultimately like that. I'm not going to be reductionist, but I think so. And yeah, it's like, and also because like just listening to what we're told to do and doing it that way because it's society does it that way, and people are afraid of doing it differently, right? And that's a really
Yeah,
big issue because people are afraid to do things for themselves or to go with their intuition if that's different from what everyone else seems to be doing, right?
right.
And how do you let go of that fear? Because fear seems to be the biggest pitfall getting in the way.
I think it's just baby steps, one little thing at a time. You're gonna have to cultivate your own faith and your own understanding of the world. Um, there's there's an interesting book I read a while back. It's called The Kabbalion, and
Huh.
it was published anonymously by the Three Initiates under that name. It's a short read, but it essentially lays out a quick and comprehensive look at Hermetic philosophy. And for those who don't know what that is, it's more of a modern guide to Hermetic philosophy, as taught supposedly by Hermes the Great.
Oh
And
yeah, the
Hermes,
thrice great or something. Yeah.
Thrice Great, yeah. And it's alleged, or it's my understanding, that Hermes was also Thoth, or Thoth, however you want to pronounce his name. Um, and I know we're getting deep, but
Oh no, yeah, I know, but this is exciting. Yeah, this could
so
be. It's
I'll
gonna
just
be.
jump into it. I'll jump into it then. So Hermes, Thoth, is also the apparently the creator of the Emerald Tablets,
Yeah,
and that's another
I've been reading it
mind. Yeah,
in the
that's a
last
mind
week or so.
blowing. So there's a tool now. Credit to Billy Carson for sharing this information, but there is a tool in the, let me see, the, I should have had this ready, but I honestly didn't even plan on bringing this up.
It's all right.
I'm gonna have to circle back to this, but there's a tool in, I have it saved in a bookmark, and I'm gonna swing back to this. But there's a tool essentially on the University Britannica website where you can go and you can pull the artifact from, the picture of the artifact from, say, the Smithsonian website, and you can drop it into their library database, and it will actually transcribe the artifact for you. So it will translate those emerald tablets, and it will translate a range of languages and dialects into their database. So what Billy Carson did essentially was he took these emerald tablets, he
Uh-huh.
translated them himself with these resources, which are free, and he sorry about that. So he actually went through, translated these himself, and then he wrote a book transcribing essentially the same things that uh, some of the most controversial historians have done, such as Eric von Daniken. That's a big name many people may have heard of. But what they've done, they've transcribed these ancient artifacts with the current translating tools at hand, which are known to be very accurate in translating Sanskrit or whatever other language they may be dealing with. And what they found is, just to give them the short version, is that humans existed on Earth quite a while ago, and we were a primitive species, but not like apes. We were just further behind in terms of evolution. In terms of evolution, excuse me. And what they found is that according to these ancient documents,
Yeah.
um, so what they found was that, hang on, sorry, Nick, give me just 1 second,
Sorry.
please.
All right. So got here the Emerald Tablets of Hermes, Trismes, Hermes Trismegistus, and I've got the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. Because apparently, according to the latter book, claims that this is from 36,000 BC, written by the king of Atlantis called Thoth, or something like that, or an Atlantean priest.
There you
Yes,
go.
I've actually
So
got the
you
book. So
stumbled on another aspect that a lot of people aren't aware of, which is Thoth is king of Atlantis. He was also known as Atlas, king of Atlantis.
really, he's Atlas.
Yes, to my knowledge, and I may be wrong there, but I know for sure he is confirmed to be Hermes, Thoth, and Enki.
He's Enki.
Yes, and his
Are
brother
you sure
is
he's Enki?
his brother is Enlil, who
Are
is
you
the
sure he's a
evil one.
Sumerian god? Because in what I read, it doesn't say that he's from beyond. It says that he's an Atlantean.
In the Emerald Tablets, Thoth goes into this and describes how he built the pyramids from top down. Let's soak that in. Built the pyramids from top down, and so essentially assimilated them. And there's evidence, especially given the monuments, that a lot of this information has been found to be correct, like the fact that they did have the first known form of light bulb in the pyramids. That's why there
And a
is no,
battery.
yes, and not just that, wireless connectivity throughout. There was no wiring, and in addition to this, there's no soot in the pyramids. There was never any torches being used within the pyramids. There's none whatsoever. So they had wireless connectivity in terms of energy. They had light bulbs. They had frequency emitting devices that depicts the great rulers holding a staff or a large staff-like device that is depicted to then emanate. As a matter of fact, I can pull this up.
Sounds like
if I do
Stargate.
screen share.
Sounds like the Garud weapons.
They had stargates as well, and that's covered in great detail in the Emerald Tablets, that they used these stargates to travel from Earth back to their home planet, and that the three things that are mentioned over and over, no matter where you look in the world, is Planet X or Nibiru, from which Anu, the god of the Anunnaki, or the leader of the Anunnaki, sent Enki and Enlil to Earth to colonize and essentially take resources from Earth. And that's where we come into the story of Adam, Adamu, as he's referred to as the first man. This literally translates to the first man, Adamu. And that's when they came in, and this is outlined in the Emerald Tablets, but they came in and essentially began to modify the existing humans, and they met resistance. It
Are you sure
shows
you're
it.
referring to the same tablet?
Yes. There's 12. So most people don't have access to all the tablets,
Okay,
but
the one I've got here, it claims that it tells a slightly different story.
okay.
So, and I also got draw upon what I've researched as well. So, for what it says, well, first of all, it says that he's from in the great city of Kior on the island of Undal, in a time far past, I began this incarnation. So he was an Atlantean, but he was in the great city of Kior.
Is
Um,
this the compendium of the Emerald Tablets by
this
Billy
is
Carson? Or
no,
which one is this?
this is
Okay.
this is the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, translated by Dorial, and it's it's also okay. Important format information. Drunvalo Melchizedek, founder of the Flower of Life organization, requested this 2-column study format for the use of the Flower of Life students. So the left column is Dr. Dorial's literal translation of the text of the Emerald Tablets, as described in the preface. The right is Dr. Dorial's interpretation. So that's the way it's done. So this is translated by someone called Dorial. I don't know who he really is, but yeah, this is the version I've got.
Okay.
So interesting. It's by Source Books and Sacred Spaces. Source Books of all things.
Hmm.
It's got Greg Braden saying it's good on the back. So this
Okay.
version of events links in with the Atlanteans who came from Maldek, I think, if I understand correctly,
And
which was
there,
destroyed by some sort of conflict or some sort of ritual or something.
yeah, so the official story that we're getting deep now.
It
The
suddenly
official
ramped
story,
way up, didn't it? Sorry,
yeah.
listeners, if it's a bit too much.
No, I'm all for it. I love talking about this stuff. So again, I always go back to Billy Carson as is pretty much the catalyst for all of my knowledge on this stuff, and I plan on having him on the podcast one day. That's definitely a dream
All
guest.
right,
So I'll be
I'm going to
reaching
make
out to
note of
him.
him myself.
Yeah, Billy Carson. And so I discovered these things through him, and then I would go, seeing him uh, do a talk or an interview, whatever it may be, and then I would go and research it. I would go on the NASA websites if he's referencing something off of there, and then I would, take it from there. So essentially, I came across this theory a couple of times. The first time I heard it, I just laughed because it didn't make any sense. But the theory was that um, essentially Jupiter used to be colonized by, human civilization or human-like
Really?
civilization. And I'm like, Jupiter, you know, okay. And just kind of moved on. Um, and then I look into it and, you know, I heard it a second time. I just found a bunch of conspiracy theory the first time, really a mix of information, a mess of information. But then the second time I heard it was actually mentioned by Billy Carson, and he said it in a way that I could take that context and then go do some research towards it. And what he said was that recently NASA released on their website pictures of the surface of Jupiter, and it actually looked like there were roads
Wow.
and
How
like remnants of cities and not destroyed but just abandoned.
on
And
a gas
I
giant?
mean, yeah.
I'm not
So
saying you're wrong. It's just,
I know it's bizarre.
did they get a way to
Um,
get them to have anti-gravity so they float?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry here. Sir, I totally messed this. Surface of Venus.
Okay, that's a
Surface
big
of
difference.
Venus.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I heard
Sorry.
about that
Forgive
about
me.
Venus. Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's
Yeah.
true, but I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, certainly
Yeah.
going to another deep thing, mystical thing, there's the Ra material, which claims that, well, the being that was channeled was Ra, and was claiming that they came to visit Earth at a certain point from Venus. They had this
Okay.
awakening to another
Yeah.
level of reality, and then they came over to Earth and to or, and to the Egyptians at a certain point, and that they also influenced that Ra also influenced Akhenaten, this whole idea of one god, and they,
Yeah. And that gets into that's where I'm not sure who's who on that because
uh,
there's also and you're right with what you've said so far. And then this ties into like even Chinese mythology and Aku, they refer to him as Aku, and he was the evil one. So it's kind of there's a lot of information out there, and you really have to follow the rope and sort through it bit
all
by
right,
bit.
I could tell you my idea of the timeline, although I will admit this is simply, don't take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt here, because
Gotcha.
yeah, I'm not just saying this to you. so so my impression is originally there was another planet that was, actually no, let's rewind even more. So it's claimed that there was, from channeled sources, it's claimed that there was a big war between, if I remember correctly, between the Federation and its allies, who were largely uh, focused on helping others and cooperating in love and light, right? And then there's this other side, so to speak, that's aligned with power and control. And it's called
Right.
the Orion Wars. Now, it's claimed that there was, and during this war, there was a certain planet that was an enemy of the Orion aliens, known to be a form of reptilians, so to speak. That's what they're referred to as. And what this planet was destroyed. I can't remember what it was called, but it was destroyed by something, by a Death Star, basically. From
Yes. And we talked a little bit about that the
Yeah,
last time.
apparently
Um,
the refugee souls, which is an odd concept. I can't remember if it's the refugee souls or the actual refugees themselves, but there was a settlement, the settlement of Maldek on this solar system, which is between Mars, which is now the asteroid belt because it was destroyed.
yes.
They settled, in any case, they settled there. They were kind of like humans, but different. Like pre-human, proto-humans, or not. They were related genetically, and they landed. They had a civilization, but the same old cyclical story of some seek power and a society gets corrupted by like a fifth column in society and that sort of thing happened, where eventually, for whatever reason, we don't need to go into details, a big disaster happened, some shenanigans occurred, and it got destroyed. So what happened is, the story goes that the people who managed to escape settled on Earth. Now it's said that I'm not sure if this is true, but I heard that there were already some reptilians there already, and they had to go underground or something, or there was a war, perhaps. I can't recall the details, but then this from there, there are people who settled on Earth. These were the Atlanteans, and there's the other people as well. They're, off the top of my head, I talked about it with my guest last night, actually. I can't remember the name of the other people, but there's Atlanteans and some other people, and they settled down. Numeria,
Okay.
Numeria, something. Lemuria, that's it. Lemuria.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
Lemuria is actually if I remember, how was it? It was Atlantis was an extension of Lemuria. Is that correct? It was
They
still connected.
they were. My impression is that they were both from. They were separate colonies from the same planet, which was Maldek.
Okay, interesting. That's the first time I've heard that. Um, so I always heard Lemuria being the older um, established civilization of
Maybe,
the Atlanteans, and then the
maybe
Atlanteans
that could be
were
it.
an extension of that, and they kind of came with that advanced
That
technology and,
that
and
could be
things
true.
like
They were
that.
certainly connected, but they were the same. They were
Yes.
the two separate civilizations who were connected. Now, in any case,
Okay.
there was now the Atlanteans weren't necessarily. I don't know for sure, but they might not have all been unified in one empire all at the same time. There might have been different Atlantises or something. But certainly, Thoth became the way it describes it is Thoth the Atlantean was a a priest king of it says the writer is Thoth, an Atlantean priest king who founded a colony in Egypt after the sinking of his mother country. So what it says essentially is that the idea is that his father was a priest king of this city who he grew up in, and he later because he what happened is, and according to this book, he found essentially the secret to eternal youth in this underground place on Earth where people used to go to the Atlanteans used to go to renew their life to live longer, but they didn't do it. It didn't work
Hmm.
permanently. It just could prolong life. But he found a way to.
Okay.
The idea of got a spark of life within us, right? He found a way to make that a flame through his wisdom and learning and spiritual enlightenment, I suppose. And so he lived. It says that he lived thousands of years, and eventually, as generations went on, as people died and were born, new souls started coming in. After Mars, which had also had people on it, had this big devastating nuclear war. And so a more martial caliber of souls started coming in and that were less awakened. And there was a sort of civilizational decline, which eventually led to the fall of Atlantis. In a big deluge. And so what happened is according to the book, his mentor, he called the Dweller. I don't know who they were or what they were, who were from living underground in the Hall of Amenti, which is the place where people used to go to renew their life. And
Interesting.
right. So then he was,
So I have heard of that.
yeah, he was told by the Dweller, go to Egypt and set up a civilization there. So he went to Egypt. Now, what do we know about mainstream history? That Egypt came first, and then a bit later, like 5000 BC or something, then at like 4000 BC as the Sumerians. So maybe what happened is then a bit later, the then a bit later, the Anunnaki came along. So maybe the Egyptians weren't so fallen as the rest of humanity during a certain duration because of Thoth, but maybe the rest, then the Anunnaki came along and they sort of, they uplifted some of the humans, but not the Atlanteans, but the people who are around, the humans that are around. And but they did it for their own purposes because they wanted workers, right? And then that fits into the whole story you're telling. So it could
Yeah.
be, and then a while later, then the Venusians came along to try to advise the Egyptians about the way of love, and so that's how I fit together different sources of information that I've come across.
So I think the only thing that I've heard contrary to what you just said is that the Anunnaki actually came earlier on, and they were essentially the catalyst for everything else that followed.
Maybe.
Now, so that's kind of the most ancient roots of every human civilization that's been established across the world. So this is where we see essentially the same underlying teachings in the most ancient Chinese uh, historical artifacts
What do they say?
and religious teachings, if you want to call it that. They all talk of one Messiah essentially that came to them, and I'm it goes by different names depending on who's translating it and depending on who you ask, but it's essentially the same person or type of person going and establishing and cultivating these civilizations, giving them language and basic sciences, fire, plant medicine. Uh, when you go to the ancient most history of the world, they were all assisted by a more advanced being and a benevolent, more advanced being who was intending to help humans get situated for life on Earth.
I've got a question.
And not that we weren't here, but it's that was the catalyst for the really the modern day society that we live in now.
Yeah. Have you heard, according to the raw material and for what I've looked into about it, I haven't read through it all yet, but according to the raw material and other channeled works, text, or what have you, there is this something called the Great Experiment, and humanity are that experiment, and that it is what it is it got genetics from different alien species sort of spliced into essentially us, so that we created, that humans were guided, they guided evolution over a period of time, or maybe they took a certain hominid and like gave certain genes to them, to us, and that it, I guess that what we are is essentially vessels that that's what all that souls go into, all the animals and beings are the physical bodies are vessels for souls, right? And that this
Right.
level of reality is for us to be separated from our larger whole and to experience, it's like a game almost, right?
Right.
And so what's that sort of anime when someone dies and then they wake up in a world, or someone goes into a computer game or something? I can't
Yeah,
remember what it's called.
it's like a matrix. It's like a
Yeah, so
matrix.
that the idea is this kind of a game that we're playing, a game of life, and that we can grow spiritually, because maybe the idea is that someone reincarnates from an animal into a human, and then they can grow as a species until eventually you can go beyond human.
Yes.
Or perhaps that sometimes a wanderer might come in and then end up getting stuck at that level, and then eventually maybe they'd come out of it. So it's interesting. This idea that we're a great experiment and that this is the whole point, purpose of this life is this expanding our awareness and our consciousness until the point that we can move on. Maybe it's just a way for us to not be bored.
Maybe. I mean, maybe this is existence itself, just mapping itself out, consciousness itself. I think from the worm to the human to the advanced being, we're all, and I don't mean this in a cliche way, but I think we're literally all tied to the same source of
Right. This is
creation.
the law of one
And
talks about this concept.
and that's creation itself. And it look, Emerson put it nicely. I don't remember the entire passage, but Ralph Waldo Emerson stated at one point that, I think he said, even the worm uh, strives to be man. So it's kind of like we talked about this evolutionary process, and reincarnation is, oddly enough, it's not talked about in modern day religion, but it is it's a common and core theme of Christianity.
Yeah, well, give me a sec. I just want to grab a Nietzsche book because it'll be interesting to
Okay.
read out a little bit of that. Because interestingly, I think what I reckon is that his idea of the Superman or the Ubermensch is actually about us going to ascending to another level, right?
Yeah, and that's
I'm gonna see if
really,
I can read out the bit in the text, but well, I don't know exactly. I'm going to maybe that's not. Yeah, I won't go searching for the book now, but it's this idea that he described it like humanity is like a bridge between animal and the Superman, and that it's a arduous journey. And sometimes people look back in fear and they don't make progress, or if you're not careful, you might fall off the edge. But it's arduous, but that's what we're for, and that we can get to another level of existence where we're with a Superman, where as a monkey, the way you talk about it, as like as an ape is to man, the Superman is to man is to the Superman. That's
yeah.
that much of a difference.
And I think it's the concept of that higher self that actually transcends the physical body and is literally in another dimension. And I think
Yeah.
we now have an awareness scientifically through quantum physics and other studies to understand that, yes, there are indeed other dimensions, other planes of
String theory
existence.
or M theory. And then there's non-local connection, the idea that there's non-locality or action at a distance. This is established in science, right? So it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily prove yet what we're talking about, but it certainly shows that there's a case to be made for it at the very least.
I think there's been some breakthroughs, like, for example, they can't under they can't quite understand, um I forget the term, but it's superposition, basically. So if two particles are bound quantumly, and you take one particle across the universe, um, it doesn't matter what the distance is. There's an instantaneous response when two particles are bound, again, quantumly, to where there'll always be an opposite position of one another. So
Polarity,
they're able
duality.
to, yeah, they're able to observe particles, and they're now using this
No, I'm up
with
here.
probes, satellites, whatever it is, to implement communication systems that are instantaneous. So they use a binary coding system to read the particles, and they can essentially send a message from anywhere in space instantly back to Earth without having to wait for transmission times.
Do you have a
So this is,
reference to that
yeah.
technology? What's it called?
Let me see. Let me. I'm gonna start looking for the actual article, because this was an actual um, like NASA release. So this wasn't theoretical. This is what they're actually doing. So
Yeah, and as you're looking, the link between quantum physics is real. If anyone wants to look more into it, it's one guy who talks about it is Amit Goswami. That's one guy who talks about it. He's not the only guy talking about the link between quantum physics and spirituality.
okay, yeah, here it is. So I guess China has been the first to implement this, but this article is from 2017, when they first achieved this, and it's called quantum entanglement communication, um, and I mean it's essentially just measuring quantum entanglement. So you can look up, if someone wanted to research this, they could simply search quantum entanglement communication satellite, and that's gonna give you tons of results, and plenty of articles, plenty of proof here. I mean, I'm looking. There's dozens and dozens of articles. So
Yeah, you know, there's this phrase that recently I've come up with. I don't know if I'm the only one to come up with it, but I just like the idea of like woo woo is true true, because there's actually seems to be evidence coming up for it.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I believe I can share my screen. Hang on. Let me pull this particular tab up, and then let me. I don't know if I can do it on. To be honest, I'm new on Zoom. I haven't even.
Well, you can put it in the
Oh,
chat.
here it is. Here it is. Share screen.
Oh, right, yeah.
Um. Okay. Let me just get my settings right here. So I'm going to share screen. Okay. Well, I'm reading through the settings. Okay. I should be able to do it. What screen are you seeing on my end right now?
I'm just seeing you,
Okay.
just your face.
Okay. Here it is.
You could just link it in the chat, and I can link it
Oh,
separately.
okay. It said host disabled the screen share. So I think it's one of your default settings is to
Oh,
um
well, it's all right.
not
You don't need to
allow it.
show me.
But
What is
that's
it?
okay. I'll
What is
send
it
the
you want to
link.
show me?
I'll send the link.
All right, all right.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
we've really expanded out from how to start up a business and fix your issues to
But I think this is part of it. You have to know who you are. You have to know where you came from, and we can't just go on pretending with this disease mindset that, nothing difficult and attaining matters. It definitely does.
All I
And
can
it
say
can
is,
be overwhelming. Go ahead.
yeah, we don't need to believe all this though. You could just go with intuition. Well, it's kind of amusing because intuition's one hell of a drug, right? Because you start with intuition and then suddenly it's like ancient aliens and everything.
Intuition leads you to truth every time. I mean, look, I'm not asking anyone to believe anything. I'm saying go out and seek answers for yourself. I don't have any religion or dogma or anything to promote. What I want people to do is empower themselves and go out and seek truth in every aspect that interests them. We don't have to know everything about everything for all of existence, but I think it is important to distinguish, you know, uh, nonsense from relevant information and actually do the research and do whatever it takes to, whether you're reading audiobook or listening to audiobooks, reading, researching, do whatever it takes to enlighten yourself to the point where you feel like you know your place in the world, and you can then establish, based on your values, a sense of purpose, and you can move forward and navigate through life with some direction, as
Yeah.
opposed to feeling overwhelmed and really unfulfilled. So that's all I'm here to invite anyone to do, is to explore, um, seek answers, and you'll find it. I mean, it's just, we have the internet, and at this point, you don't have to go sifting through hundreds of books in the library. I mean, it's amazing that we're able to just go look for exactly the thing that we want to know. So there's really no excuse. Get out there and research the things that you're interested in. But the link that I sent you, that was just the actual Google search. So again, all there's tons of articles right there.
All right.
Um,
So I feel like we're close to finishing up at this point. Just so, but there is one thing I wanted to say at this point, which is that so the key to going from feeling lost and following the programming to searching for, for expanding your mind, searching, finding truth and all that, and success and inner peace, happiness, is intuition. Now, what that gives you is, firstly, it gives you a sense of empathy, connection, a sort of love in a sort of universal sense. The other thing that you get from it is wisdom, and from wisdom you can get power, because an understanding of reality, you can manifest and achieve what you want in life better, and that is the definition of power, is it not? With
yes.
that, though, is responsibility and choice. You can choose how you use that. And fundamentally, the choice at this level of reality is, are you going to focus on love and connection with others, or love with yourself? Objectively speaking, it's not wrong to love yourself and focus on it's serving yourself. It's just most people won't resonate with that because they have empathy and they care for others. If you don't, I mean, I suppose logically speaking, uh, you can go the route of Genghis Khan if you want. Um, that's ultimately the choice in reality, at least according to the law of one and other such sort of mysticism. Um,
Yeah, I think if you were to outline this, um, in the simplest format possible, it would be in the form of the hero's journey. And that's
right.
just my take on it. But you start in this ordinary world that we're born into. And I'm looking at I've got a image up here that I'm following to actually read out just a short reference of what it is. You start in the ordinary world. This is like on the movie The Matrix, when Neo was at his his desk job in the ordinary world, totally disengaged from any higher purpose.
Yeah.
Then there's the call to adventure. He followed the white rabbit. There's the
Right.
refusal of the call. There's the meeting of the mentor. And that's, when he got to choose between the red pill and the blue pill, that was crossing the threshold. There's no going back after that. And I think that's so true. Like, once you start diving into this stuff, the real truth, and you take that first step out of the ordinary world, there's no going back. And that's a good thing, because you cross this threshold, you reach a certain point of knowing what you don't know. And that sets in for your journey. And there's tests, allies, enemies along the way. You've got to go within yourself, and there's a metamorphosis within yourself. You're going to face challenges. Things will, get sort of climactic along the way. And then in that process, there's a reward. They refer to it as seizing the sword, or returning or attaining that knowledge. And then there's the road back. And that's the process, that cycle of empowering yourself, enlightening yourself. And they refer to that as a resurrection, because you've essentially, the old you has died, and now you're a new person. You're reborn, and you return with the elixir. And that's the liberation, not just for yourself, but for everyone else.
Yeah.
And then that process continues. So I think
Because it
that's,
repeats,
if
right?
you had to lay it out, yeah, and that's it. And then you in returning with the elixir, it doesn't say this in the chart, but who are you returning to? Other aspiring individuals who are on that same journey that you just endeavored upon. So that's what it is. And I think a lot of what we talked about really, covered the core understanding of what this is. That, I always wonder why it's called the human race. Race to what? The human race.
Yeah.
These terms are intriguing to me, but it seems, from what I gather, it seems that this is some sort of environment that was created by design. Even if all of existence is like this, this fractal matrix type of universe, and it's infinite. Okay, so be it. But it appears that it's a system and a process of refinement of the soul, of conscious existence, of being itself. And we go through this evolutionary process. We, maybe we're reincarnated multiple times. It's certainly a crucial element of Christianity that's oddly not discussed.
Yeah, it was an early Christianity.
In church. I mean, it's in like all the ancient biblical art for Christianity, with Jesus by the tree of life. And, I mean, we can go on all day. It's constantly referenced. The suffering of life, and the process, the literal process of reincarnation of the soul. And then there's that transcendent element. And that, I think, is what we're trying to perceive as heaven. And there's also, I know I'm kind of going on here, but there's also the element of you create your own heaven and your own hell here on earth. Your life is either a living hell or heaven, I guess, if you want to call it that, fulfillment. But Yeah, it seems to be a process. I think it's irrefutable to me that this is a system, there is a process of evolution taking place here, and it's best to treat it with value, even though it may not be the extent of all reality. Life here on earth and this human experience may not be the extent of all reality, but it seems to be an essential component. So I don't want people to get the notion like, oh, this is a matrix, none of this is real, it's a game, so it doesn't matter. But I think it
It all
does.
matters.
I think it would be hard to believe, as elaborate as all of this is and the way things are functioning, it would be very hard to believe that it didn't take a lot of effort and planning to put all this together. And whether it's a simulation or not, it would be hard to believe that it doesn't matter. That's so.
Yeah.
That's
What it,
my deductive reasoning.
all right. Yeah. I'd say it makes sense. And what it comes down to for me is ultimately your intuition is the key to navigating these difficult times or any times really. So yeah, I think we can wrap up there because we've gone all
That's
over
it.
the place and it's been really, really
Yeah.
fascinating to have this conversation. So
Well, it was good to be on, and I think if people can understand that, they will be in a good place to move forward and navigate through life, through good times or bad. So
yeah.
I
All right. So
think
bye,
that's
Eric,
it.
and bye,
All right.
listeners. Have a nice day.
All right. Take
Right.
care.
Bye.